What's going on, Internet? Durlroz here, coming at you with another World of Warcraft video. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about warrior tanking in 5.0. Hopefully I'll be able to give you guys some ideas and things to think about in the weeks leading up to Mists of Pandaria. However, after Mists of Pandaria releases, I'll be uploading a new video giving my thoughts on how warriors are functioning in the first tier of progression. So, jumping right into things, I want to ask the simple question, what has really changed? And to answer this question, I'm going to use this tab that Blizzard has provided for us called What Has Changed. Number 1. Talents. The talent trees have changed. They are now less cookie cutter and more do what you want to. It's very playstyle and encounter oriented. You might choose this talent for this one particular fight and then a different talent for a different encounter. 2. Stances. Stances have changed so that we no longer have a stance requirement on all our abilities. This is a good change for PvP and arms. However, this is a minute, very minor change for protection warriors, as all the skills that we use are all defensive, and any ability that required battle stance or Zerker stance were not really worth using in the first place. Number 3. Range has changed so that now some of our abilities no longer cost rage, some of our abilities generate rage, and some of our abilities spend rage. These abilities mainly being Cleave, Heroic Strike, Shield Barrier, and Shield Block. Number 4. Rend has changed. It is now called Deep Wounds, and it is applied by default by Devastate and Thunderclap. Now let's move on to what Blizzard has given to us as our quote-unquote core abilities. These being Charge, Shield Slam, Revenge, Devastate, and Shield Block. You can also add Shield Barrier to this list, however. Shield Block and Shield Barrier generally function the same way. 2 abilities that I'd like to point out that are not on this list are Cleave and Heroic Strike. There has been a lot of QQ and TTing on the class feedback forums for the beta, saying that I'm not generating enough rage, I can't use enough cleaves and heroic strikes to effectively hold threat, and I would just like to say that both of these statements are utter crap. Any rage that you are generating should be spent towards shield block and shield barrier. What Blizzard is pushing for tanks in Mists of Pandaria is active mitigation. Any rage or resource that you have should be spent towards trying to mitigate as much damage as possible. Mainly meaning that you're going to want to reduce the amount of damage you're taking. Warriors are going to do this through shield barrier, mainly for magic damage, and shield block for physical. You're going to have to choose which of the two to use for a certain fight or a certain part of the fight. This is a really interesting change. Right now it's functioning amazing. Warrior tank DPS all round in Dragon Soul is broken right now, but let's just focus on the mechanics of things. Both of these abilities are amazing. Main problem that warriors had with Dragon Soul was we had no way to actively mitigate magic damage. Now we do through shield barrier. Greatly looking forward to this change come tier 14 progression. In Mists of Pandaria, everyone is going to have to make some choices with their class and roles. These choices being your talent points and your glyphs. Starting with talent points, you're now making one choice out of 3 skills for 6 tiers. Each choice changes the way you're going to play your class in a given encounter or part of the game. These choices don't really change very much of how your class works, just more changes the play style of it. Here you can see my choices for a more generic warrior tank spec. Some changes that I might make in the spec are Piercing Howl and Disrupting Shout, depending on if I need another interrupt or I need a slow. Another choice I may change between two is Safeguard and Vigilance. During Heroic Madness progression, I was using Safeguard on the other tank so that he can have some more damage reduction, and I can also receive every single hand of sacrifice. This was basically required for our raid composition, unfortunately. For my level 90 talent, I'll probably be choosing between Stormbolt and Avatar, as I feel that there's no real need for Bloodbath. Moving to glyphs, the glyphs that I have chosen are Unending Rage to increase my maximum rage by 20, Hold the Line, which used to be a talent, and Heavy Repercussions, which also used to be a talent. Some glyphs that might come in handy in a given encounter are Gag Order to add the interrupt to your heroic throw, and Shield Wall to add the extra damage reduction on Shield Wall, while also increasing the cooldown on it by 2 minutes, which essentially doubles it. All your minor glyphs are just aesthetic things. They don't really matter which you choose. I'm going with the Mighty Victory, Gushing Wounds, and when it's available, the Burning Anger, which will set me on fire when I'm enraged, which sounds awesome. Now that we've gone through the more major changes for warrior tanking, I'm going to take us into just a generic rotation / priority system for Mr. Pandaria. Now, with the new range changes, we can do one of two things. We can walk right in and get going with threat and damage, or we can do what we've always had to do since Cataclysm. If you haven't been doing this exactly, this is what I've been doing, which would be Shout, Berserker Rage to build up some rage, charge in, get some more rage, Shield Slam, Revenge, and I would usually Heroic Strike. However, now in Mr. Pandaria, you're not going to be wanting to use Heroic Strike or Cleave unless you have an Ultimatum proc. If you do not have an Ultimatum proc, you're going to be wanting to use Devastate, Thunderclap, or Shockwave, while still keeping Shield Slam and Revenge on cooldown. Instead of spending Rage on Heroic Strikes, we are going to be spending them on Shield Blocks and Shield Barriers. Shield Barrier obviously for magic damage, and Shield Block for physical. You're going to have to choose which one to use for the given ability in the boss fight, or the boss fight as a whole, whichever you feel fit. So that's generic rotation: Shield Slam, Revenge, Ultimatum proc, Thunderclap, Devastate, Shockwave. Just keep it going like that. Use your Shield Block, Shield Barrier when you can, and as you see fit. Now I want to talk about a big change for warriors. This is our cooldowns. We have now been given some cooldowns. Hallelujah! We have cooldowns. These cooldowns being the new and improved Demoralizing Shout, Rallying Cry, no longer sharing cooldown with Last Stand, Revenge if you choose to spec into it, and once Mr. Pandaria releases and we are level 90, we will have our banners. Now, what are all these cooldowns? Well, Demoralizing Shout, 10 second, 20% damage reduction to all damage, amazing. Magic damage, physical damage. I wish we had this for Dragon Soul, seeing as it was all magic damage. Very useful. Use it basically on cooldown for the most part. You're going to be wanting to use it all the frickin' time. If you're just going to let it sit there idle, it's a waste. Make sure you're using the bloody thing. Next up, Last Stand and Rallying Cry. No longer sharing cooldown, but you have a duration cooldown. So Last Stand lasts for 20 seconds. You can't use Rallying Cry for the next 20 seconds. Rallying Cry still functioning for the raid. Last Stand solely for yourself. Last Stand 30% health increase. Rallying Cry 20% increase. Use at your discretion. Usually when you get quite low health. You usually want to pop one of these when you reach 30-40%. 20% and lower, you're pushing it from being one shot at that point. Next cooldown, Vigilance, if you choose to spec into it, 30% damage reduction to a friendly target. Personally, I picked this because I thought I would be putting it on the other tank for the most part, but it's also useful in the sense of you can put it on anyone else in the raid in case they did something silly, i.e. stand in the thing bad. Moving on to our banners, our final cooldown here, we have 3 of them. They all share cooldown and they both have a very unique purpose. Starting off with Demoralizing Banner, it's a 20% reduction to all damage, similar function to Demoralizing Shout, although it's 10% instead of 20, and it lasts 15 seconds instead of 10 seconds. It also is raid-wide, unlike Demoralizing Shout, which is only for yourself. Very interesting. Going to try to get as much use out of it as possible. Next up, Mocking Banner. In Miss Pandaria, we lost our Challenging Shout AoE taunt. We, however, gained Mocking Banner, which is our AoE taunt back. Mocking Banner, though, is a little better. Instead of a one-time taunt, like Challenging Shout was, and then having a 3-minute cooldown, Mocking Banner is an AoE taunt that pulses for 30 seconds, and then has a 3-minute cooldown. So you get a little more use out of it, but from what I've seen with raid testing, I don't think we'll be needing an AoE taunt anytime soon. So it'll be interesting to see if we actually get a use for this skill or not. And our last banner, Skull Banner, it's a raid DPS increase cooldown to increase the critical strike damage of the raid or party by 20% for 10 seconds. Interesting cooldown. Again, see how much use we can get out of it, hopefully a lot. Potentially, depending on the fight and how long the fights are, we can use Skull Banner towards the start of the fight and Demoralizing Banner towards the end when the damage is getting a little bit hairy. But again, it's all going to be situational and at your own discretion. Make sure you're making reasonable and educated uses of all your cooldowns. I'll be making a video in the near future about using your cooldowns and not having them sit idle. When they're sitting idle, you're not getting use out of them, and you're potentially wasting damage reduction, which is bad as a tank. So this has been a very brief yet thorough look at warrior tanking in 5.0. Hopefully you got some ideas and things to think about for the next couple weeks until the game releases. Once again, there will be another video after release giving my thoughts on how we are functioning as a class in the raiding progression. Hope to see you then, and until then, be cool and game on.